Hello again everyone, it's me MadameMacabre, and welcome to another video. Hello to all my new viewers. If you're not from around here, we do lots of different things here, usually delving into the realms of the spooky and the unusual. For today's video, we're going to be delving into a viewer submission, so everything you're about to hear is a true story, from one of you no less. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please, I invite you to subscribe and hit that little bell down below. And without any further ado, let's dive right in. Today's submission is from Royal Hearts. Here we go. Hey there. For almost 18 years of my life, I've experienced so many things related to the supernatural. I've lived in 8 different houses and have never known peace. Eventually, after years of pondering, we've sort of led to the fact that someone in this household must have an entity tied to them. Upon narrowing the numbers down, there are a possible 3 out of 5 of us who it could be. We're not sure yet. First, it could be my mother, who's a victim of abuse and who I believe that may be extremely depressed. Along with this, she also lived in one house that stirred many problems before I was even born. Next, there's my father, who is often silent, so we can never really tell much about his emotions. He once lived in a house on what we believe to be native land, and it was extremely problematic. He doesn't have many experiences before I was born, though. Then, there's me. Shortly after I was born, my great-grandmother on my father's side passed away. I am personally a very emotional, empathetic being, and I have experienced an excessive amount of the supernatural. Now, in summary, it's possible that my parents and I could be tied to the entity. My siblings, however, so far haven't shown any signs of possibly being related to this issue, or so we believe. So, with that little bit of context out of the way, we can begin digging into the different experiences at the different properties. We'll start with the first house. This is where I, the oldest child, was born. I was also the first grandchild on both sides of the family as well. My parents and I ended up living with my grandfather at the time. According to my mother, I was constantly being moved by someone they couldn't see. As I was a newborn, it was highly unlikely that I was moving myself from one location to another, so she was rightfully concerned. Along with this, my mother would often hear voices speaking to me when no one else was around. She never did find the source of them. Another little fact, this is the house my father grew up in that was on native land. Alright, moving on to the second house. In this home, it was just my parents and I, a family of 3. We ended up moving to an apartment. According to my parents, when I was just a little girl, I made friends with someone called Auntie Anne. This ain't no pretzel maker. She was a troublemaker. Things would disappear and reappear constantly. Sometimes they would be little things that didn't matter at all, and then other times it would be a bit more dangerous. That's what led to the problem, such as the scissor incident. As per usual, an object went missing only to reappear elsewhere. However, this time the item that disappeared and reappeared, on the couch no less, was a pair of very sharp scissors. I happened to be sitting on the couch, and I slid off without realizing the scissors had appeared there. This resulted in my leg being sliced open. If this wasn't enough, there was another entity I experienced myself. This was the man in the doorway. This was the first time I saw this unsettling figure, but it was not the last. Along with my own experiences, my mother also frequently saw little children who would disappear when she confronted them. Upon some digging, we learned of a grim history of the apartment. Supposedly, a terrible crime had occurred here. A man shot his 2 children and his wife before shooting himself. We never did encounter the wife, but we believed the children were his, and possibly the shadowy figure of the man was him. Moving right along to the third house. This next house we rented, and at this time, a new addition to the family was added, my brother. I'm not sure if a new birth stirred things up or if it was entirely unrelated. However, that being said, things started happening shortly after moving in. First, that familiar man of shadows began appearing once more, this time in the backyard. He never came in the house, but he was always out there, watching. Then, I would begin waking up in the middle of the night to my radio turning itself on. One might think there's technology malfunctioning or different programs interacting in a way that might cause this to turn on. But the thing is, this was back when technology was quite simple. There wasn't really any explanation for this. And along with my experiences, my poor mother had her own share. First, she was often plagued by horrible nightmares, unlike any she had ever had in any home ever before. And worse, she was nearly gravely injured by a wardrobe that was so large, heavy, and sturdy it could barely be moved by grown men, somehow toppled and fell over on top of her and my little brother. Miraculously, she was able to protect him and only received minor injuries herself. However, it's an understatement to say we were shaken. We never did find out much about the history of that house. We just got out of there as soon as we could. Next up was house number 4. This was the first house my parents officially owned themselves, and at first, things were fine. Nothing was wrong. It wasn't until I was in the 2nd grade that things started to become amiss. That was when my friends and I decided to play the ritual game Bloody Mary. Children often play games like this, so I didn't think much of it. Well, we played the game and, as you probably expect, nothing happened. Or so we thought. Though nothing happened during the game, it seems like it might have stirred something up in the house. Ever since, I began having terrible nightmares. No one else in the family, just me. And on top of this, I began waking up to my closet door open when I knew for a fact it had been closed when I went to bed. And that's when the shadow man came back, just watching, just like last time. Shortly after that, my family decided to move again to a bigger house, as my baby sister had just been born. I did look into the history of this house. It was fine, nothing bad happened, nothing bad should have happened. That one may have been my fault. Whoopsie. Next, we have house number 5. Now, compared to the other properties, this one was a little tame, but it is fair mentioning it nonetheless. While living here, my father was never comfortable. He said he always had the feeling of being watched and would sometimes see things move in the corner of his eye. For some reason, I struggle to remember this period of time, but I do vaguely remember waking up to a shadow figure in the corner of my room. It was a man, of course. From what we could find, there wasn't anything particularly worrisome in this house's history, though the area was known for crime, which is why we ended up moving. This led to house number 6. My grandmother actually gave us the house she used to live in. She said it was perfectly fine and should be supernatural free. The first few months, she was absolutely right. It was perfectly fine and normal. However, after that, things began to change. Out of nowhere, my little brother started refusing to use the restroom. And this was the only restroom we had in the whole house. He was terrified. He said things would start moving all by themselves when he was alone in there. He even claimed to have seen full apparitions at one point. And once again, I began having nightmares, the same deep, dark ones as before. And once again, I would see that shadow man. My mother made an attempt to stand her ground with whatever it was that was in the bathroom. This didn't end well. She must have pissed it off. For the following 3 days, she had the most horrific nightmares of her life. She strongly believes it was a demon. Finally, there was my father, who would see a thick, black fog swirling in dark corners. Having had quite enough of this property, the family decided to move once again. We tried explaining this to my grandma so she'd understand why we were leaving, but both her and my aunt said nothing ever happened when they were there, and they started to think my mom was crazy. That is, until everyone else in my family told them their experiences as well. House number 7. This house is right next to my grandmother's house, and soon to be my house. We didn't have any problems until my friends started complaining. They said they kept waking up to shadows staring at them and don't want to spend the night there anymore. I had another friend who had never even been inside but refused to even step foot in because she said she felt a dark aura. This was also a very dark time for me personally. I was very lonely and being bullied. One night, I heard something go through my sketchbooks on my desks. I looked up at the area and saw red eyes and a shadow man again. Along with this, I once saw a strangely shaped white figure walk into the shed in the backyard. And again, I saw something while I was sitting with my family. My mom barely captured a glimpse, seeing only the shadow, but I saw a strangely shaped child running to the gate leading to the front yard. We instantly ran to the backyard and the front looking for the child, but we never found them. The gate was locked. Of course, again we moved. Finally, we're on to house number 8. My family and I are currently living in this house. We have lived here for about 5 years now, and it's been extremely emotional. I wrote out the worst of my depression and bad feelings here, and after a few scares, I finally started to get better and worked through my own mental things. But while things were at their worst, they were at their worst. On top of this, we found out there were infidelity issues with my father, and to this day, talks of divorce are off and on. Needless to say, there is a lot of negative energy that has built up in this home. Hoping for some sort of relief, we actually reached out to our local psychic for a ritual placed on our home the day before Christmas, hoping to drain the negativity. After Christmas, I got into an emotional argument with my parents, and that's when things started popping up. My dogs began randomly freaking out over nothing that could be seen, either in the bathroom, my room, or near me. My Raggedy Ann doll would begin moving to different places when no one else was around. Odd nightmares would occur, each in different scenarios, like a shooting, a murder, things like that. And my beautiful favorite porcelain doll that has a music box inside of it began playing randomly, off and on, without anyone or anything bumping into it, and without anyone winding it up. Fortunately, I haven't yet seen the Shadow Man again, but I could have sworn the other day I saw an apparition in the dining room. And finally, my mom walked into the living room while I was asleep in there, and she said she heard male voices speaking directly to me. I didn't respond, of course, because I was asleep. Since then, my parents have saged the house, and so far, things seem to be going pretty well. Ever since the saging, my dreams have been in and out. My last nightmare after saging was a loop dream, one where I'm trying to survive shootings. I'm not the type of person who gets nightmares after reading or watching something scary. Either way, nothing about shootings was in my history during that day, so I'm not sure why that's the dream I keep having. I am mostly doing better, with just the odd panic attack here and there, though I do have a constant feeling of just tiredness. On the bright side, my parents are getting counseling now, and are even getting spiritually cleansed here and there. My mother refuses to let me meet the psychic, and refuses me to even be near one. Though, according to the psychic, something did follow my father, but is unsure if it's gone or not. She's trying to figure out if it's still with him, or if it's officially gone, and there's a possibility it might have attached itself to someone else. We don't know. So at this moment, we're doing cleansing and saging. We've even collected a bunch of crystals, but I think they're kinda ugly and would be happy to toss them out. Hopefully someday we'll figure this out. Anyways, no matter what, something always seems to happen with me. School, camping trips, literally anywhere. I'm always unlucky when it comes to the supernatural. But it can be entertaining sometimes. Though so far there's fortunately no signs of being possessed, which that's always good. I just hope that sometime soon I can finally live in peace for at least, maybe 5 years. So if keeping a collection of ugly rocks can help, I guess I'm willing to give it a try. Oh my, well, that really is quite an abnormal amount of paranormal activity. But on the bright side, at least your family isn't just dismissing it and calling you crazy for seeing things as a little unusual. It sounds like they're trying things too, so that's good. Since your parents are already open to and actively seeking help from people who are familiar with this stuff, I'm not sure there's much else I could tell you that they're not already being told. However, I will throw in my 2 cents as far as who the entity could be attached to. Now, this is probably just a wild little conspiracy theory. There isn't all that much weight to it. It's just some thoughts I got from reading your story. You mentioned in the second house you lived in, there having historically been a man who killed his family and then himself, and very shortly after living there, you start seeing a distinctly male shadow figure that's aggressive and toppled a dresser on your mother and little sibling. I don't know, it could be nothing, but part of my brain goes, that's odd. But that's just a theory. A ghost theory. Oh my god, shoot me. Alright, well now I'm going to release it to you guys. What do you think? Any different ideas? Any thoughts? Any comments? Any similar experiences? Feel free to share in the comments below. But that is all we have time for today. So until next time, remember, stay creepy.